Game. Okay, sige. Start tayo. So this is the last Wednesday. Last meeting for the whole semester since the following Wednesdays are holidays. But, of course, may gagawin kayo. Sige. So, content analysis. Saglit, kung makita. Content analysis is a study of documents, records such as textbooks, newspaper, historical documents, records of speeches, and other written materials which are relevant in the understanding of a research problem. This method is properly used in historical studies and as a preliminary activity in the preparation of reading materials like textbooks, brochures, campaign materials, and instructions, education and recommendation materials for development programs. Content analysis is used in evaluating written materials such as information, education, communication materials, curriculum training modules for their readability, completeness, and appropriateness. It is also used to determine the balance of information emphasis in a certain written material. So when we say content analysis, titignan nyo yung actual na content. I-analyze nyo yung actual na nilalaman ng isang document. Remember, nag-conduct kayo ng review of related literature. Doon sa review of related literature nyo, somehow, medyo parehas dito. But, content analysis, titignan nyo yung kabuuhan. Hindi lang yung review of related literature, yung buong research na. Titignan nyo kung accurate ba yung mga nakalagay doon. Siguro nakakakita kayo ng mga posts sa Facebook na yung mga pictures sa mga modules, yung mga, ano ba yun? Connect the dots. Yung, matching type. Yung mga matching type. Tapos, for example, toothbrush ay i-connect mo doon sa ngipin. Tapos, lipstick, i-connect mo sa lips. Yung relo, i-connect mo sa kamay. Yung mga ganon. Tapos may mga part doon na walang pwedeng i-connect yung isang item. Yung mga ganon kasi nagiging problem, at kailangan, or dapat na subject yung mga ganong textbook sa content analysis. So yung ganong textbook, may problem sa content analysis nila, hindi nila chinek. Kumbaga, this is just cross-checking whether the information in your document is accurate. Tama ba siyang paliwanag doon sa document mo? An analysis of a written material can assess the stand of the writer regarding a certain issue or subject like cheating in tests, homosexuality, gender issue, globalization, liberation, faith, capitalism. Malalaman mo yung side nung author. Pro-cheating on tests ba siya or anti-cheating on tests ba siya? Doon mo makikita yung mga points ng author sa content analysis. Content analysis can be done in many ways. In education, before a new textbook is mass-produced, it undergoes content analysis for readability. Magpiprint muna ng sample, tapos titignan kung readable ba siya, mababasa ba siya. Baka yung font na nakalagay doon sa textbook, font size 8, tapos ang magbabasa, grade 1. Siyempre, mahirap yon para sa grade 1, di ba? Magsisimula pa lang siyang ma-master yung pagsusulat, pati pagbabasa. So, kailangan mas malaking font. Yung mga ganon. Yan yung mga hinahanap sa content analysis. Sample pages of the book may be distributed to sample of potential users of the book. They will be asked to read the materials and asked to answer some questions that will check on their understanding of the reading materials. Kumbaga, di ba sa mga textbooks, yung mga pang elementary, may instruction. Kung yung instruction ba na yun ay malinaw, malalaman in content analysis kasi nga magpiprint ng samples. Kunwari, pinrint natin activity 1 and 2, tapos sinubukan nating ipasagot sa mga grade 1 din, sa mga potential users nga. Then, Kapag mali-mali yung mga sagot nila, ibig sabihin may problem tayo doon sa instruction, hindi maintindihan. Or other factors, yun na nga, maliit yung font, kunyari, yung apple, syempre, ang color nun, either green or red, di ba? Yung apple color violet, syempre mako-confuse yung bata. Hindi niya iisipin na apple yun kasi wala namang, sa pagkakaalam ng mga bata, wala namang apple na color violet. Di ba? Yung mga ganung bagay, i-check. Yan yung for content analysis. And in research, of course, the whole research needs to be subjected to content analysis. Kasi you are giving new knowledge, di ba? At kung ano man yung resulta ng research mo, this is supposed to bridge the knowledge gap. Yung gap nga, yung kakulangan, i-fill in nyo yun. Yun yung trabaho. Yun yung purpose ng research, di ba? Then, validity and reliability. Pag sinabi nating valid, tama ba siya? Pag sinabing reliable, maaasahan ba to? Okay? Parang sa mga newspapers o yung mga nakikita nating news providers sa internet, lahat ba ng nakikita nating blogs sa internet ay reliable? Siyempre, yun na nga, isa-subject pa natin for validity and reliability. Okay, wait lang ha. Okay. So, the quality of instrument used in research is very important. Pag sinabi nating instrument, ito yung questionnaire mo. Okay? Since the conclusions drawn from the findings of a study are based on the data collected, 'di ba? Kung ano yung magiging result ng research, kung ano yung mapupunta dun sa part ng results and discussion, lahat yon galing dun sa data collected. 'Di ba? Hindi ka naman pwede maglagay ng result na walang connect doon sa data. Ang questionnaire mo tungkol sa restorative justice, tapos ang pinapaliwanag mo doon sa results and discussion mo tungkol sa punitive justice. O di walang connect, 'di ba? So yan. For inferences drawn from the study to be valid, the research instrument must be valid and reliable. So para malaman na ang data na ipaliliwanag mo sa results and discussion ay tama, kailangan yung mismong ginamit mo ay tama. Yung ginamit mong instrument sa pag-kolekta ng data ay tama. Diba? Kasi kung nag-collect ka ng data, tas hindi naman pala pwede gamitin yung questionnaire na yon, o di lahat ng magiging bunga nun ay hindi mo na pwedeng, kumbaga hindi siya magiging reliable, hindi magiging tama, hindi magiging accurate yung discussion mo. Kasi nga, invalid yung instrument. Okay, gets nyo ba yun? Okay. Parang, in some sense, parang fruit of the poisonous tree, yung doctrine na yun. Diba? Kapag mali ang paraan ng pagkuha mo ng ebidensya, lahat ng bunga ng ebidensya na yun, pwede mo pa bang gamitin sa korte? Pwede ba?
No.
Hindi, di ba? Yun nga yung fruit of the poisonous tree. Bunga nga nung puno na poisonous. Literal yun eh. Kapag ang puno kasi nilason, lahat ng bunga niya, magbubunga siya, oo. Pero yung bunga niya, hindi mo makakain. Kasi nga, poison din siya. Agad-agad siyang bulok. Ganun yun. So, ganun din sa questionnaire or sa research ninyo. Kung ang questionnaire ay hindi tama, hindi siya accurate, hindi siya valid, hindi siya reliable, lahat ng nakuha mong data doon, hindi mo magagamit. At yung results and discussion mo, hindi mo rin magagawa ng maayos. Hindi rin siya magiging valid. Okay. So validity refers to the appropriateness, meaningfulness, and usefulness of inferences of researcher makes on the data they collect. A research instrument is valid when it measures what it intends to measure. Magiging valid lang siya kung yung gusto mong makuha na impormasyon ay makukuha niya. Okay. So, ang topic mo, gusto mong malaman kung ano ang epekto ng pandemic sa mental health ng estudyante. Tapos ang instrument mo ay hindi naman patungkol sa mental health. Ang inaano ng ang data na makukuha mo mula dun sa instrument mo ay tungkol sa physical health. So, anong gagamitin mo sa pagpapaliwanag? Wala. Hindi mo naman pwede gamitin yun. Walang connect sa research mo. Okay? The researcher should make sure that any information collected through the use of an instrument serve the purpose of which it is collected. Parang isa yan sa mga tanong ko nun. Yung title ninyo should be related to your statement of the problem. Kasi yung resulta doon sa mga tanong mo, yung sagot sa mga tanong mo doon sa SOP, ay dapat magre-reflect doon sa title mo. Kasi kung hindi sila tugma. Okay? So there are 3 kinds of validity of an instrument. These are content validity, criterion-related validity, and construct-related validity. Content validity, an instrument has content validity if the content and format of an instrument appropriately covers the topics and the variables intended to be studied and the items adequately represents the subject to be assessed. The content and the format with the operational definition of the variables. The key element in content validity is the adequacy of sampling of items that are included in the instrument. We were able to tackle sampling. Content validity is intended to determine if the items contained in an instrument comprise an adequate sample of the content which is supposed to represent. Isa rin yan sa mga tanong ko nun. May isa sa inyo gusto niyang survey mga tungkol sa mga physically abused na babae dito sa Kamba. Ang tanong ko, ilan sila? Hindi daw niya alam. So kung hindi mo alam, hindi natin sure kung meron. Kung wala, hindi mo rin makukuha ng tama. Meron pang isa, gusto niyang malaman yung related sa parenting styles. Then, hindi naman pwede na magtatanong ka lang sa 2 o 3 magulang kung ang gagamitin mo ay questionnaire. Dahil kapag konti lang yon, hindi nga magiging valid ang results ng study mo. Kailangan madami. Depende na lang yan sa kung anong statistics ang gagamitin mo. So how do you determine content validity? A common way of determining the content validity of an instrument is by having one or more individuals look at the content and format of the instrument and judge whether or not they are appropriate. The person who will ask to look at the instrument should be able to render an intelligent judgment of the adequacy of the content and format of the instrument. When 2 or more individuals evaluate the instrument, the process is called jury validation. Familiar kayo sa term na jury? Yes? Pepito, familiar ka doon? Wala si Pepito. Buwan. Wala din.
Hindi po
Nako, may problema tayo. Hindi nyo alam yan. Judge. Familiar naman siguro kayo, di ba? Ang judge ang nagde-decide ng cases sa mga korte dito sa Pilipinas. Sa ibang bansa, meron silang jury. These are your regular members of the community and they are asked to judge the case. Kumbaga si judge ay parang, ang dating mediator lang doon sa korte. Pero ang magdidesisyon talaga sa kaso ay yung jury. Madami sila. Tapos, sila yung magde-decide. Ang judgment kasi, di ba? It should only be rendered when there is no doubt, even to a regular member of the society. Yung kumbaga kahit yung mga simpleng mamamayan lang, maiintindihan nila na itong taong to ay guilty nga base dun sa mga ebidensya. So madami silang maghahatol. Kaya ang sinasabi dito, when jury validation is when two or more individuals will evaluate your instrument. Kasi hindi porket kunyari gumawa kayo ng questionnaire, tapos pina-check nyo sa advisor ninyo, agad-agad okay na yon. Hindi siya ganon. Ipapa-check nyo yan sa experts. For example, nung katulad nung ginawa ko sa thesis ko, since it's pertaining to cybercrime victimization, nagpa-evaluate, tapos ako lang ang gumawa ng questionnaire ko, pina-evaluate ko siya sa 3 experts. One, sa cybercrime unit ng region natin. Second, sa dean ng College of Computer Studies sa school namin nun. Kasi cybercrime nga. So, yung mga terms na cyber-related, hindi naman tayo well-versed doon dahil, syempre, criminology nga ang natapos natin. Hindi naman tayo IT. Wala tayong mastery or higher knowledge sa information technology. So, yun. And the other one is isang researcher, head ng research. So sila yung mga kinonsider namin na experts at sila yung nag-jury validate doon sa instrument na ginamit ko. Hindi basta-basta yan. Kaya ang isa ring paraan para hindi mahirapan ang researcher, nag-a-adapt. Kumbaga yung mga validated na research instruments, hihiramin na lang nila. Papaalam lang sila doon sa gumawa ng instrument na yon. Tapos sasabihin lang nila na pahiram po gagamitin namin sa research. Then kapag umokay na siya, pwede mo namang gamitin. Okay? And then, another is criterion-related validity. An instrument has criterion-related validity if a score obtained by an individual using a particular instrument significantly associated with a score obtained on another instrument known as criterion. So how do we determine criterion-related validity? A researcher can compare the answer of the subjects in the instrument being evaluated with their responses in another instrument called criterion. Okay? And then, constructed related validity. This refers to the specific psychological constructs being measured by the instrument and how well these constructs explain the differences in the behavior of individuals. How do you determine this? There are 3 steps involved in measuring the construct-related validity of an instrument. You have to clearly define the variable. Your variables are the things that you measure, that you are obtaining data from sa research mo. For example, sex, civil status, age. Those are variables. Level of victimization, yung mga ganun. Formulating a hypothesis based on a theory and testing the hypothesis both logically and empirically. For example, the researcher who plans to use a questionnaire to measure the level of aspiration of student wants to use the construct-related validity approach to validate her instrument. The researcher defines the level of aspiration, then formulates hypothesis and presents a theory on why the levels of aspiration of different individuals vary. Then the researcher administers the questionnaire and determines variations in the responses of the different groups. Dito kasi pag construct, sabi nga ay psychological siya. Hindi talaga to mabibigyan ng structured idea. Kaya ang gagawin, i-measure yan sa levels. Katulad nga nito, di ba? Level of aspiration. Gaano mo daw kagusto ang isang bagay? Nyari kayo, nag-aspire kayo na maging, of course, registered criminologist after passing the board exam. Wala naman sigurong ayaw maging criminologist sa inyo, di ba? Okay. Tapos ang sinasabi dyan, i-measure natin gaano mo kagusto yun. Siyempre, hindi mo naman, pag sinabi ng isa, gusto ko po, ma'am. Sabi ng isa, gustong gusto ko po, ma'am. Yung isa, Sinabi niya rin gustong-gusto, pero hindi mo ngayon alam kung may pagkakaiba ba yung gustong-gusto number 1 at yung gustong-gusto number 2. So, this is what you do in instruments measuring such. Ano bang kaibahan ng gustong-gusto at ng gustong-gusto number 2? Gets nyo? Kasi kahit nasabihin natin na we define something for ourselves, minsan kasi hindi natin talaga na-express yung mga kaklase natin o yung ibang tao, na-express nila, pero parehas lang naman pala kayo ng sinasabi o ng ibig sabihin. Diba? So that is what we use to determine the validity for specific psychological constructs. Reliability of the research instrument. Reliability refers to the consistency of the responses or the scores obtained by an individual in a test instrument as administered twice. For example, in a test in math, a student is expected to get high grade in the second test if his score in the first is high. Reliability of this test can also determine if two forms of the test can be prepared and the scores of the students in the two forms can be compared. Na-experience nyo na ba magkaroon ng exam na set A, set B? Face-to-face pa?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, di ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Kung pinag-test ka, nyari yung isa sa inyo, nag-set A. Tapos yung isa, set A din. Pag pinasagot din sa inyong dalawa, yung set B, dapat parehas ng score or hindi nagkakalayo yung score. Kapag ganon, na parehas ng score or hindi nagkakalayo yung score, then we will determine that the test is reliable. Kasi kung magkaiba ng score, hindi mako-consider na reliable yung instrument natin. Okay? So methods in determining the reliability of an instrument. There are two methods commonly used in determining the reliability of an instrument. Tested method and the split half method. When we say tested method, this involves the administering the same test twice to the groups of individuals after a certain time has elapsed. The same test is administered to the same people again, then the reliability coefficient is calculated to determine the degree of association between the results of the two administration. If the coefficient is significant, instrument is reliable. Kumbaga pinag-test kayo. After some time, ibibigay sa inyo yung same test. Then kapag kinompare yung dalawang yun at mataas ang result, kumbaga mataas ang pagkakaparehas, then alam natin na the instrument is reliable. Then, internal consistency or the split half method. This approach involves the scoring of the first half and then the second half of the instrument separately for each person and calculating a correlation coefficient for the two sets of scores. If the correlation between the two sets of scores is statistically significant, then the instrument is reliable. Ito naman, hahatiin yung test. For example, 1 to 50 ang test. Ang gagawin dito sa internal consistency or split half method, iba ang measure natin dun sa first half, dun sa 1 to 25, tas iba rin yung measure natin dun sa 26 to 50. Hindi tulad doon sa number 1, sa tested method, buo siya, 1 to 50. Iko-compare doon sa second test na 1 to 50. Dito sa split half, 1 to 25, iko-compare din sa second na 1 to 25. Then, mali. Iko-compare yung first half to the second half pala. Unlike in test-tested, dalawang beses magte-test with the same test. Okay? So, summary. For content-related method, para masabi mo na valid ang instrument mo base sa kanyang content, you will have experts, yung may jury validation. Ipapacheck mo sa mga taong maalam tungkol dun sa topic mo. Then, criterion-related method, this will relate to another measure of the same variable. And then construct-related method assess evidence from hypothesis or prediction made from theory. Then reliability, test tested, give identical instrument twice to the same group of respondents. Yung 1 to 50 ibibigay sa inyo. Ng dalawang beses. Then internal consistency or split half method, divide instrument into halves, hahatiin, 1 to 25, 26 to 50. Then score each and compare results of both instruments. Okay. Next is data processing. Ano daw ang data processing? It is a set of procedures of categorizing, organizing, and presenting data in suitable forms that will make the data meaningful to the researcher and suggest what statistical tool need to be done so that this can be correctly interpreted. When all data needed to answer the study objectives have been collected, the data should be processed in preparation for analysis. In short, nakuha mo na yung data, 'di ba? Namigay ka na ng questionnaire, nag-conduct ka na ng survey. Nakuha mo na yung mga survey. Doon ka na magsa-start ng data processing. You will now categorize, you will organize, and you will present the data. Gagawa ka na ng mga table. Kasi hindi naman basta-basta 'yon. Okay? Then, why is data processing necessary? In the studies involving collection and analysis of quantitative information, a great amount of information needs to be processed in preparation for collation and analysis. With the availability of computers, data processing has become simple, fast, and accurate. Microsoft Excel will help you a lot. Large amount of information can be stored in data files, which can be easily retrieved and analyzed. Through data processing, data can be checked for completeness, consistency, and accuracy. I remember, nung nagde-data processing na ako, doon ko palang nakikita na may mga respondents na hindi na sasagutan yung ibang mga questions. So, may mga blanco. Yun, doon mo palang makikita yung mga yun. Kasi, pagkakuha mo ng survey, kasi face-to-face pa nun, no? So, pinamimigay ko yung survey questionnaire. May mga schools na hihintay na lang ako, as in, ako na yung mamimigay sa estudyante, tapos sasagutin nila, hintayin ko. Meron din namang mga schools na binigay ko na lang sa kanila, tapos, minessage na lang ako kung kailan ko babalikan, at nung binalikan ko, kompleto na may sagot na lahat. Yun. So, ito yun. That's part of data processing. Then, coded and organized data can be easily and safely stored. I also remember, since part of my study was the profile, as in yung demographic profile nila. So, meron akong, sex, male or female. Pag male, I decided to code it as 1. Then kapag female, i-code ko siya ng 2. So, pag lumalabas sa Excel, nakalagay na lang siya, numbers na lang yung mga sagot nila, hindi na male or female. Nyari, nakalagay na lang, sex. Tapos, ang sagot dun sa survey na yun ay male siya. So, i-code ko siya ng 1. Kung yung questionnaire, ang sagot ng estudyante ay female siya, then i-code ko siya ng 2. Ganun yun. That's coding. Then tables, graphs, charts, and other forms of data processing can be easily generated. Ito na yung for presentation nga, gagawa ka ng tables, graphs, or charts, depende sa research na ginagawa mo. And then statistical analysis and generation of statistical outputs can be done easily and quickly. Of course, statistics. Mas madali na kasi naka-code na nga siya. Kumbaga naka-convert na siya into numbers. Ayan. Then before starting the data processing, the researcher must decide on whether processing will be done manually or by using a computer, what tables, graphs, charts need to be generated, and what statistical manipulations will be performed. So before anything else, kailangan na pagdesisyonan mo na yan. Paano mo gagawin yung mga yan? Okay. Then data analysis. So after data processing, data analysis na. Nakukuha nyo? Data processing, ipaprocess mo pa nga lang. Kumbaga, inaayos mo pa lang yung data. Wala ka pang ginagawa talaga dun sa... Hindi mo pa ini-interpret kung anong ibig sabihin ng data mo. Inayos mo pa lang siya. Then, data analysis is a process of summarizing trends and patterns observed in the data, determining major differentials among variables used in the study, and the application of appropriate statistical tests on a set of data to answer the objectives of the study. So, eto na yung gagamit ka na ng statistical tests para ma-interpret yung results ng survey mo. The type of data analysis to use depends on the objective of the study, depende sa kung ano yung gusto mong makuha, depende sa kung ano yung variables na nandun, and the kinds of scales of measurements of the data or variables being dealt with. So, magdedepende lahat, again, sa SOP mo. Pati dun sa methodology, your chapter 2. Okay. Scales of measurement. Understanding the scale of measurement of data or variables helps determine the type of statistics that can be used in analyzing data to answer the research objectives. Here are 4 levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Ito yung mga paraan ng pagsukat ng data. Ng scales, sorry. Nominal scale. It has no mathematical value. It is also called categorical scale. Numbers are assigned to categories of nominal variables to facilitate data processing. A higher number assignment does not mean a bigger value or weight. For example, ito yung sinasabi ko. Sex is a nominal variable. Its categories are male and female. Wala namang katapat na mathematical value. Nagets nyo ba? Sa nominal scale, walang variable na higit kaysa sa isa. Gets nyo? Hindi porket, hindi porket male ay mas higit siya sa female. Hindi siya ganon. Or hindi porket female, higit siya sa male. Hindi. Ang ibig lang sabihin, nominal, wala talaga silang mathematical value. 'Di ba sabi ko kanina, yung male kinode ko siya as 1, then female kinode ko siya as 2. Pero hindi naman ibig sabihin higit si male kaysa kay female. Nagigets niyo ba? Wala silang katumbas na mathematical value. Binigyan lang natin ng number para ma-convert natin siya as quantitative data. Kasi nga quantitative numbers ang involved. Gets niyo? Okay. Ordinal scale is a measure in which data or variables of unordered or ranked into 2 or more levels or degrees, such as from low to high. The distance between the first and the second ranks, however, is not the same as the distance between the third and fourth ranks. So, for example, 3 high school students who got the first, second, and third honors in their class obtained a general average of 94.89 and 88 respectively. Their rank in class is ordinal variable. Pag ordinal scale, ito yung may rank. Ito yung may, kumbaga, may halaga. Katulad nga daw, pag sinabing, yung example natin dito, yung rank 1, naka 94.89. Yung rank 2, naka 88 siya. Sorry, mali ang basa ko. 94, then 89, then 88. Yun yung grades nila. So, kumbaga, may halaga yung numbers. So, pag 94 ka, syempre, ikaw yung nasa taas. Then, pag 89, ikaw yung papangalawa. Then, pag 88, ikaw yung papangatlo. Hindi tulad sa nominal scale, wala silang halaga. Male, female, single, married, divorced. Yung mga yung walang halaga. Pero lalagyan natin sila ng number. For example, si single, 1. Si married, 2. Si divorced or annulled, 3. Pero hindi porket number 3, siya yung mababang uri. Hindi naman. Pag nominal scale. Gigets nyo? Pag ordinal scale, nakarank sila. May first, may second, may third. Ang isa pang minimeasure natin, yung mga levels or degrees. Katulad nga, gaano kasakit kung iniwan ka ng jowa mo? Rank mo from 1 to 10. 1 being the lowest, then 10 being the highest. Mga 8 lang. Di medyo masakit eh. Sabi mong ganun. So, naka-rank siya ng 8. Yun, di ba? Pero pag sinabi mo, ma'am, 2 lang, ibig sabihin, hindi ka masyadong bothered nung iniwan ka ng jowa mo. Di ba? Kumbaga, bawat number may ibang interpretation kasi nga may rank sila. Okay, then interval scale. An interval scale has the characteristics of an ordinal scale, but in addition, the distance between points in the interval scale is equal. For example, body temperature is considered an interval scale. Kumbaga, wala ring hindi sila ranked, but it can differ. Sabi nga dyan, characteristics niya ordinal scale. Ibig sabihin, hindi mo nga siya nirarank. Then, the distance between the points in the interval scale is equal. For example, paano ko ba-explain yun? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yan. So, ang magiging scale natin is 1, 3, 5, 7. Kumbaga, may 1 na nasa pagitan. Yun yung distance. Yun yung interval. Okay. Then, ratio scale. A ratio scale is almost like the interval scale, except that the ratio has a real 0 point. An example of ratio scale is monthly income. Income values of equal distances between each other. So, diba? Pag sumweldo ka, for example, ng 10,000 sa isang buwan, sunod na buwan, 10,000 pa rin ang sahod mo. Diba? Interval, kasi nga may buwan. But, pare-pareha siya. Real 0 point. Unlike in interval scale, yung distance nila, pare-parehas. Dito, 0 siya. Okay. Nominal scale. Ito yung summary, no? They are categorical. The categories do not have mathematical values. One is not higher or lower than the other. For example, sex, color, and civil status. Then, ordinal categories can be ranked. The difference between the first and the second rank is not the same as the difference between the second rank and the third ranks. Kasi nga, may rango sila. So, degree of malnutrition, honor roll, level of anger. Yung mga samples. Interval, data have numerical value. Then, the distance between 2 points is the same. But there is no 0 point or it may be arbitrary. So, magdedepende doon sa tao. So, body temperature in Fahrenheit, business capital, number of children are spent in studying. Okay. Ito, may numbers. Kuha nyo, may numbers siya. Pero, hindi, wala nga 0 point. At magdidepende yan sa tao. Siyempre, nyari, pamilyan to, ilan yung anak nila? 3, for example. Then sa other family, 1 lang yung anak niya. Then sa other family, 5 yung anak niya. So, may number, pero 0 point. Okay. Then, there is no 0 point pala. Then, sa ratio naman, the same as interval data, but the 0 point is fixed. Katulad ng sahod. Okay. Next is Module 8. Types of analysis. In data analysis, variables may be analyzed one at a time, a univariable, or 2 or bivariate, or 3 or more at a time, multivariate. Data analysis may be descriptive and inferential. So, univariate muna tayo. Descriptive analysis of single variables may be used to describe the characteristics of the data and describe the variance within the data. Pag sinabing variance, the amount to which your data varies. Gaano siya nagkakaiba. So, describing the characteristics of the data. A researcher may want to describe the characteristics of a sample population considering one variable at a time. The question commonly asked of the data is, what are the characteristics of the population katulad ng mga iba sa inyo. May mga ganyan silang question. Yung demographic profile, yan. Characteristics ng population, yan. There are two methods of analyzing the data to answer this question. One is frequency distribution and the other measures central tendency, which includes the mean, median, and the mode. Familiar ba kayo sa mga to? I think this was discussed ng senior high school. So, frequency distribution. The distribution indicates the number and percentage of responses for each category. The frequency distribution is a useful measure for analyzing nominal and ordinal data. In short, ilan? Ilan sila? So, ito. Distribution of students according to sex. Sabi, ang example, merong 45 na male, merong 70 na female, at ang lahat ng sumagot ay 115. Then, convert mo lang siya sa percentage. Okay? That's nyo yan? Yan na yan, frequency distribution, kung ilan. Okay? Ito, distribution of children by nutritional status. O, for example, yung normal daw, 30. Yung first degree malnourished, 20. Second degree malnourished, 15. Third degree malnourished, 10. Then the total is 75. Okay? Yan na yun. Yan na yung mismong frequency distribution, kung ilan sila. Okay. Then the other one is measure of central tendency. Central means hanahanap natin yung center, yung gitna. The measure of central tendency which are commonly used, called average, enable the researcher to summarize the data in a single number. This number represents a typical score attained by the group of individuals or subjects on a certain variable or measure. The three most commonly used measures of central tendency are mean, median, and mode. Kumbaga, isa lang yung hanap natin na number, yung gitna. Pero may tatlong paraan para gawin yon. For example, mean is the average of all values. It is useful in analyzing interval and ratio data. The mean is derived by adding all the values and dividing the sum by the total number of cases. In short, mean ay yung average. Kumbaga, lahat ng data, in-add mo, tapos dinivide mo sa kung ilan yon. For example, hinahanap ko yung average ng mga test scores nyo. For example, 10 kayo, 5 sa inyo naka 2, then 5 sa inyo naka 4. Anong average? Anong average? Anong mean? Sige, compute nyo. 5 sa inyo, 2 ang score. 5 sa inyo, 4 ang score. Anong mean? Reyes. Andiyan ka, Reyes? Wala. Alfonso?
Yes po.
Anong mean?
Two po sa po 4 nakuha ng
Ano
po, yung mean po 3.
3. Tama. Paano mo nakuha?
Kasi po sabi pag yung a-addin po sa is di-divide
I-divide mo saan?
sa mga nakuha po. 2 po.
I-divide mo sa mga nakuha?
Kung ilan po rin sila.
Kung ilan. I-add mo lahat ng values. Yari nga, di ba, 5 yung 2. So, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Ilan to? 10. Di ba? Tapos, 4. Sabi ko, 5 ang nakakuha ng 4. So, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Add mo to lahat. Sagot is 30. Divide mo sa kung ilan sila. Fourth year na kayo, Alam niyo naman na siguro paano magkumuha ng average. The answer is, pag inad nyo sila, 30. Pag dinivide mo into 10, kasi 10 nga yun lahat-lahat, the answer is 3. So, the mean is 3. Yun yung central tendency kapag ang gamit mo ay mean. Pag median naman, median is the midpoint of a group of interval measures arranged from the highest to the lowest. For example, in the scores below, which are arranged from lowest to highest, the midpoint is 8. The midpoint is 8 score from the lowest 82 and the 8 score from the highest 96. And the 8 score, which is 91, is the median. Kasi 82 to 96. 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. 15 yun. Ano yung gitna ng 15?
8.
8. So, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89. Bakit 89? Sorry, mood pala yung sinasabi ko. Okay, ulit. For example, in the 15 scores below, which are arranged, asa ba yung sample nito? From lowest to highest, the midpoint is 8 score. Hanapan ko ito ng sample. Sige, babalikan natin. Yung sinutukoy ko pala is mode. Mode is the most frequent. Hindi, tama. No, it's not 91. 89 to. Mali. 89. Okay, tama yung sinasabi ko. Sorry na agad. Median, yung pinakagitna doon sa buong range ng numbers. Then mode is the most frequently occurring figure in the set of figures. In the actual situations, modal scores are usually near the middle of the continuum of scores. So, for example, in the 15 scores below, 90 is the mode because it occurs 3 times. So, ano yung pinakamadalas na lumalabas na number? For example, dito, ang 82, isa lang. Ang 83, isa lang. 85, isa lang. 87, dalawa. 88, isa lang. 90, tatlo. 91, isa. 93, dalawa. 96, dalawa. 97, dalawa. So, ang pinakamadami, 90. So, that is the mode. Okay? Okay. Then next is describing the variance in the data. So the two commonly measures of variations are the range and the standard deviation. So the range is a simple measure of variation calculated as the highest value in a distribution minus the lowest value plus 1. Ulit. The range is a simple measure of variation calculated as the highest value minus the lowest value plus 1. For example, 1 to 10. 10 is the highest. Minus the lowest value, ang lowest natin is 1. So 10 minus 1, 9. Plus 1, 10. Yun ang range. Okay. So in a sample data, the highest score is 97. Then the lowest is 92. So, the range, 97 minus 82 plus 1. So, 15 plus 1 equals 16. 16 is your range. Okay. Highest value minus lowest value plus 1. Then, standard deviation. The standard deviation gives the average of distance of individual observations from the group mean, the square root of the average square deviation of each case from the mean. But in actual research, hindi naman kayo ang gagawa ng statistics. Na meron talagang statistician. Okay. Pero alam niyo lang dapat yung mga simple katulad ng frequency distribution tsaka yung central tendency. Kadalasan kasi hindi na yung pinapastatistician kasi dagdag bayad pa yun. Ang bayad kasi sa statistician per table. Ganun. Kaya yung mga pwedeng gawin nyo, kayo na ang gagawa. Then, describing relationship between variables or bivariate. Many studies focus on determining association between two variables. The simplest way of finding out whether there is an association between two variables is by using cross-tabulation. A cross-tabulation displays the distribution of one variable for each category of another variable. Kumbaga, may tabulation ka dito, may tabulation ka dito, then i-compare mo sila. Multivariate analysis permits the researcher to study further the effect of one variable to another. When one or more variables are held constant, it allows for the determination of the effect of variables on the relationship between two variables, controlling for one or more variables. Basically, itong ABC ay yung sa statistics na yan, yung sa data analysis nga. At yun nga, involved doon ang statistics, which in real life dapat talaga statistician ang gumagawa. Although, yun na nga, kailangan nyo lang ng background doon. And para mailagay nyo rin sa method, sa research method ninyo. Okay? Then, data interpretation. So, nung una, di ba, pin-process natin, inayos natin yung data. Yung sunod, inanalyze natin yung data kasi gumamit tayo ng statistics. Yun yung data analysis. Then now, data interpretation. Base dun sa nakuha mong resulta sa data analysis, ipaliliwanag mo ngayon to. Data interpretation is the process of explaining the meaning of the data in a table with emphasis on the highlights and trends shown by the data. It further explains the meaning of the data and relates the findings to results of related studies and the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework. Ang gagawin mo ngayon, di ba may lumabas na result sa dun sa data analysis mo. Ngayon, yung mga table na yon, ipaliliwanag mo sila kung ano yung naging resulta. And then, kapag napaliwanag mo na sila, maglalagay ka rin doon ng support para masabing valid yung naging result. Anong support yon? Kukuha ka or maglalagay ka ng related literature ulit. Or i-compare mo yon or i-mention mo yung theoretical framework or conceptual framework na ginamit mo. Kumbaga, sasabihin mo doon na etong resulta ng study ko, sumasang-ayon siya doon sa mga nahanap ko na literature. At ito kasi yung sinasabi ng literature. Then, sa theoretical framework, sabi ng theory, ganito. Tapos, ilalagay mo rin doon. Kaya nga, ini-interpret mo, pinaliliwanag mo na nga yung resulta ng study mo. Before interpretation is made, however, the data must be first presented in reference to a table, graphics, or other forms that make it easy for the researcher to see patterns, trends, relationships which aid the making of a generalization. Papakita mo muna siya ng line graph, bar graph, or tables. Depende nga kasi sa study. For example, ang study mo ay yung trends ng property crimes dito sa Arayat, for example. So, kunuha mo yung data, di ba? Na kung gaano kadami ang property crime sa Arayat. Tapos gagawa ka ng per year, for example. 2010, ganito. Dito yung point. Then 2011, 2012, 2013. Ibig sabihin, tumataas. Magiging mas madaling ma-visualize nung mga gagamit ng study mo. Mas madali mo rin siyang mai-interpret. Okay? Suggested steps in interpreting the data, for example. Sige. Hanap tayo ng sample. Ito. For example, sa una, kaya sobrang kapal ng research ko kasi ang daming tables. Ito. Yan, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data. For example, Ito. Frequency distribution, kung maalala nyo. Ilan sa kanila ang ang respondents ko ay 376. So, ilan sa kanila ang naka-receive nakaranas ng cyber fraud, yung nag-order sila online pero hindi na-deliver, 134 over 376. Ilan sa kanila ang nabully, 188. Cyberbullying, 188 over 376. Ang pinakamadami ay yung nakaranas ng virus ang flash drive, ang cellphone, ang computer nila. Kasi 318. Okay, tapos, of course, i-convert nyo yun ng percentage, then irarank nyo sila. Ayun. Tapos, ang pinakamababa dyan, ayan, online sexual harassment involving rewards. O, sige, maghubad ka, bibigyan kitang pera. Yung mga ganun, may kapalit. Yun nga, yung pinaka-content, 95 sa kanila nakaranas ng ganun. Then, ipaliliwanag mo yan. Ganyan siya, kahaba. Yan, sabi. Table 3 presents the frequency of victims according to the cybercrime they were victimized by. Ranking first is 318 out of, ito yung virus, 318 over 376, 84.57% yun. Then, pinaliwanag lahat. Then, ito, sinasabi ko. Doon sa ibang tables, sabi, indicator with the lowest mean as to criteria exposure to motivated offender of the routine activities theory. Ito kasi yung sa SOP ko. Exposure to motivated offender according to the routine activities theory. Tapos, ito yung lowest. Lowest mean. I have been asked to do something sexual when not wanted online. Ayan. Ang mean ko is 1.42, then the verbal interpretation is never. Ibig sabihin, hindi talaga nila naranasan yun. Then, kung makikita niyo dito, the indicator with the lowest mean regarding the criteria exposure to a motivated offender of the routine activities theory is, I have been asked to do something sexual when not wanted online. The mean of this indicator is 1.42 with the verbal interpretation. Never, pinaliwanag mo muna yung table. Then, ito, the Philippines is considered as the top global source of child sexual abuse materials according to UNICEF in 2016. It is also mentioned that there are 75,000 child predators online according to UNICEF. Ito na, yung sinasabi na magko-connect ka ng review of related literature mo. Ito. Ayan. It further explains the meaning of the data and relates the findings to results of related studies and to the theoretical framework or conceptual framework. Okay. Suggested steps in interpreting the data, review objectives, hypothesis, and theoretical and conceptual framework, and use this as guide. Then, describe the data, other than yun nga, yung table, di ba? Kita nyo nung first paragraph, naka-describe lang siya, ano yung ibig sabihin doon. Kinonvert mo lang siya into sentences. Then, the researcher may describe using fractions or ratio to avoid monotony. Then, in describing and interpreting data, a researcher may focus on extreme numbers, especially when the numbers are less than 100. Enumerating the tabulated data in the text should be avoided. In some cases, absence of mention of certain categories is also meaningful. The data serve supporting facts to the test. Thus, the table must be placed after the text that presents and interprets the data in the table. The number of table where the data to be found must be described or discussed or found must be referred to. In interpreting across tabulated data, the researcher should describe or discuss the dependent variable in relation to the independent variable. Of course, all variables should be described. kung may dependent at independent variable ka, i-discuss mo yung relationship nila. If a hypothesis is being tested, it should be stated that the hypothesis is either rejected or not rejected. One may also state that the findings do not support the hypothesis. Papaliwanag mo din doon kung yung hypothesis mo ay sinang-ayunan ng results ng study mo or hindi. The generalization must be supported by the data from the table. Lahat ng sasabihin mo doon, magbabase ka doon sa table na nagawa mo. Doon sa resulta nung survey mo. Studies with theoretical or conceptual framework must show whether or not the data support the theory used. Di ba may ginamit ka sa theoretical framework? Ipaliliwanag mo rin doon sa katulad nga nung example natin kanina, ipaliliwanag mo dun sa results ng study mo, yung theory mo. Iko-connect mo siya. Sasabihin mo na, oo, sumasang-ayon siya na biktima kapag hindi siya pag ginamit niya ang computer na walang guardian, ay magiging susceptible siya sa pagiging victim. Yung mga ganun. Totoo yung sinasabi nung theory na kapag ganito ay ganito nga ang resulta. Kita niyo naman sa table na to. Yung ganun. Papaliwanag mo siya. Then, the findings of related studies should be compared with the results of the study. Answers to the following questions can serve as a guide in data interpretation. Do the findings contradict or support the findings of previous studies? Sumasang-ayon ba yung resulta ng study mo sa ibang study? What are the contradictions? Meron bang mga parte na hindi sumasang-ayon, na tumataliwas? What are the possible reasons for the contradictions? Okay. Wait lang. Okay. For qualitative analysis, ito naman kapag interviews ang ginawa mo. There are some data or information which cannot be qualified or are better analyzed in their qualitative form. Ito yung mga mahirap talaga. Alam nyo, yung mentor ko, ang una kong binigay sa kanya na draft ng dissertation ko, qualitative. Sasabi niya, sobrang hirap ng qualitative, mag-quantitative ka na lang. PhD yun ha. Yan ang advice niya sa akin, mag-quantitative na lang. Kasi mahirap nga naman mag-qualitative. Lalo na ngayon, hindi naman tayo makapag face-to-face at hindi naman lahat willing na ganito online na interview. So, ayun lang. Kaya, good luck sa mga gusto mag-interview. Examples of these data are beliefs, attitudes, and perceptions, especially regarding delicate subjects. These types of information are usually collected using qualitative approaches such as an in-depth or key informant interview. May mga iba't ibang paraan ng pag-a-analyze din ng qualitative analysis. So, result of a key informant interview and focus group discussions are summarized, categorized, and described. No statistical analysis required for qualitative data. Eto, hindi mo kailangan ng statistician dito kasi nga qualitative, puro ka interview or yun nga mula sa focus group discussions ang kukunin mo. So, walang numbers involved. Puro paliwanag lang kung ano yung naging resulta ng data collection mo. Qualitative data are useful supplement to quantitative data and they can also provide detail to the statistical data and analysis. In addition to descriptions, relevant direct quotes of the respondents may be included in the analysis. As in yung mga mismong sinabi ng respondents ninyo, pwede yung isama doon sa interpretation ninyo. So, unique views of voices of the respondents or key informants can be directly quoted and included in the discussion to give color and life to the data. Yung kunyari, sinabi nung biktima na, sobra po akong na-trauma kasi binubugbog po ako ng tatay ko, sinasampal niyo po ako, at Kaya po ngayon, wala po akong tiwala sa mga lalaki. Kunwari lang. So, pwede mong i-quote yun, yung lalagyan mo ng ganun quotations. Then, pagkalagay mo nung sinabi niya mismo, hanap ka ngayon ng review of related literature. Hanap ka ng literature na related doon, na ang physical abuse ay ay related sa pagbibigay ng tiwala o sa pagkakaroon ng tiwala sa isang tao. Yun, kumbaga yung sinabi nila, bibigyan mo ng support. Na, meron na nga sa ibang studies na ganito. Na, oo, totoo nga yung sinasabi niya. Kasi sabi ni De La Cruz sa study niya noong 2020, ay kapag ang tao ay inabuso, mahihirapan na siyang magtiwala. Yung mga ganun, i-connect mo siya. Okay, and last module, research proposal. Ito, yung ginawa natin, but yung ginawa natin is for chapter 1 only. Research proposal is usually 1 and 2. Okay. Module kasi natin, last part pa ang pang chapter 2, di ba? Ngayong finals pa lang natin diniscuss. Kaya, para ma-experience nyo na ang research proposal, yun, 1 and 2. Then, a research proposal is a plan of how a study will be undertaken. It describes the steps that will be followed in the conduct of the study, from problem identification to data analysis, like a map. It serves as a guide for the researcher in the implementation of a study. A proposal must be well written and must be able to convince the persons to whom it is submitted for approval. It should show that the study is worth doing, that it is feasible, and that the proponent competently undertake the study. Kaya nga sinasabing research proposal, magpo-propose ka pa lang. Hindi pa ito final. Kaya nga, di ba, nung nag-propose kayo, hindi naman lahat ng sinabi ninyo sinang-ayunan ko. Kasi nga, proposal yan. Ito yung sa tingin mo na dapat mong gawin. Pero yung mga panel ninyo, magsasabi sila ng mga bagay na mas magandang gawin or dapat gawin imbes na yung sinasabi mo. Kumbaga, may mas magandang paraan o kaya yung tamang paraan ng paggawa. Kaya nga sa inyo, proposal lang. Pero of course, the proposal, sabi nga dito, must be well written and must be able to convince yung panel mo na worth gawin yung research na yon, na feasible, na kayang gawin. At ikaw mismo na researcher, pwede mong gawin yung study na yon. Parang, for example, since criminologist ako, of course, lahat ng, hindi naman lahat. Well, education-related na things involving criminologist also. Kumbaga, qualified akong gawin yon kasi nagtatrabaho ako sa school bilang teacher at criminologist ako. So, mga bagay na patungkol sa school at criminology, qualified ako doon. Pero kung mag-undertake ako ng, for example, dito, kunyari, gusto ko mag-eksperimento sa mga daga. Gusto ko mag-eksperimento sa mga daga. Qualified ba ako na proponent para doon? Siyempre, hindi. Hindi naman ako biologist. Hindi naman ako scientist. Behavioral scientist ako, pero hindi yung scientist na yung alam natin na nasa laboratory. Kumbaga, hindi porket naisip mo, qualified kang gawin yun. So, lahat ng patungkol sa medicine, hindi ako qualified. Lahat ng patungkol sa engineering, hindi rin ako qualified doon. Wala akong kaalam-alam doon. Kahit pa na feasible yung study na kayang gawin, pero ako hindi ako competent para gawin yung study na yun. Okay? So, again, kasi sa mga proposal, nilalagay nyo rin dyan yung credentials ninyo. Of course, lalo na kung graduate studies na yan, kung master's or PhD na kayo, doon talaga masusukat kung competent kang mag-undertake ng study na yon. Unlike kasi sa undergrad sa inyo, ay yung mga related lang talaga, tsaka gabay, matindi ang paggagabay ng mga advisors sa undergraduate researchers, katulad ninyo. Kaya, not really, kapag hindi ganun katindi ang scrutiny based on your competencies sa paggawa ng researches. Okay. Characteristics of a well-written research proposal. Ano yung mga katangian na dapat meron ng isang research proposal? It must be persuasive, clear, complete, and flexible. Persuasive. Nagpa-persuade ka, nangungumbinse ka. The proposal must show that the proposed study is relevant and worth doing. Magagamit ba natin yung information na yan? O ano yan, trip lang, walang kwentang research. Yun. Kukumbinsin mo sila na may sense tong research na to, na magandang gawin ng research na to, makaka-contribute to sa knowledge gap. That the proponent is knowledgeable about the problem and that the problem has a logical basis and that the proponent has adequate background knowledge about the problem. Yan yung mga dapat meron ang research at ang researcher. Under persuasive. Then complete. The proposal must contain all parts required by the institution to which it will be submitted. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, ang format kasi iba-iba base sa institution, base sa kung ano yung format ng school ninyo or ng institution ninyo. Katulad ko, 2 school na ang napag-aralan ko ng masters, ng graduate studies ko, masters ko dito sa Pampanga, then PhD ko sa Baguio. Magkaiba yung format nila. Kaya hindi ko rin, although magagamit mo rin naman yun, pero kasi yung pagkakasunod-sunod, yung ibang parts ng chapter, nakahiwalay ang review of related literature mula sa introduction. Meron namang mga schools na magkasama ang intro, ang introduction, pati ang review of related literature. So, depende nga. Ang mahalaga lang, kompleto. Then, clear. It must be written in clear, simple language. The methodology must be clearly and adequately described. Kumbaga, nakalagay doon yung mga research method mo. Papaliwanag mo, bakit yan ang dapat gamitin. Kasi ganito, ito ang related sa study ko. Yung mga ganun, it should be clear. Then flexible. The proposal must be flexible. It should allow for possible changes or modification during implementation if needed. Pero as much as possible, no changes na. Kasi pag nag-start ka na ng data collection mo, dapat wala na talagang mabago. But it can be flexible, especially if you are doing qualitative research. Then, parts of a research proposal. The content of a proposal depends on what is required by the organization. Sabi ko nga sa inyo, depende yan kung saan ka magpapasa, where the proposal will be submitted. For instance, for a research proposal for a master's degree or doctoral dissertation, the requirements of a particular institution is followed. For funded research, the funding institution usually prescribes a formal format which includes the parts to be included. All proposals, however, have basic parts which include itong mga to, the title, the introduction, statement of the problem, theoretical and conceptual framework, hypothesis, if any, then significance of the study, scope and limitation, review of related literature, methodology, your chapter 2, description of design, sampling, data collection, data processing, and data analysis, then references or bibliography, yung listahan ng lahat ng ginamit mong sources sa paglagay ng review of related literature, pati nung explanations mo. And then, schedule of activities, kasi ilalagay mo rin kung anong araw dapat tapos ka na sa part 1, anong araw dapat tapos ka na sa part 2. Yan yung schedule of activities. Budget, if required. May ibang mga schools na pinalalagay nila yung budget, lalo na kung funded, kasi yung iba nga, hinihingi nila or binibigyan sila ng fund ng school. And then appendices, yung research instruments, yung survey questionnaire mo, yung request letter mo sa mga barangay, sa mga schools, lahat ng ginamit mo na document ay isasama mo rin. Okay. So, the title must be clear, simple worded, and must specify the major variable of the study. Dapat nandun lahat yon sa title mo. Although yung ginawa nga natin, working title ang tawag doon. Kasi pag sinabing working title, pwede pa siyang mapalitan. Actually, may mga pagkakataon na sa final defense, napapalitan pa yung title nila. Then, introduction. The introduction must provide a background and rationale of the problem and gives the justification for conducting the study. Sasabihin mo, ano yung problema? Bakit dapat nating solusyonan yung problema na yun? Bakit dapat nating gawin yung study? That's part of introduction. In this section, the research problem is defined, the research objectives are stated, the hypotheses are presented, and the theoretical and conceptual framework are presented and explained. Nandun lahat yun. This is also where the variables are operationally and limitations of the proposed studies are presented. This is your chapter 1. And for the background and rationale of the study, the introduction and rationale of the problem usually includes a brief description of the problem situation with supporting facts and figures, statement of the desired condition and the discrepancy between what is and what should be, then possible reasons for the discrepancy, bakit kaya may problema, what is already known about the problem. So ito na yung review of related literature mo. And then questions still unanswered or information gaps. Ano yung mga wala pang studies? Ano yung mga hindi pa nasasagot or konti yung data? Ilalagay mo din doon. Objectives of the study state what the study aims to do and find out. Stated in behavioral terms, the objectives specify the what, why, who, where, and when of the study. The variables to be studied are specified in measurable terms. Then, theoretical and conceptual framework. For relational studies, a theoretical framework must be presented to explain the theoretical basis of the study. Katulad nga ng mga nabanggit na natin, katulad din ng mga nagawa nyo na, meron tayong theory na pagbabasehan. A theory that explains the existence of the problem. Sabi ng theory, pag may ganitong, kaya may theory kasi may ganitong problema, paliliwanag mo yun. And an elaboration on how the problem may be influenced by the independent variables are presented. In place of a theory, researcher may use related studies that reveal possible connection between the problem and the independent variable which are assumed explanation of the problem. Then, on the other hand, conceptual framework naman explains in operational terms the assumed relationship among major variables of the study. Yung buong konsepto ng study mo. Kasi sa theoretical framework, kumuha lang tayo ng theory. Tapos i-connect natin sa study natin. Sa conceptual framework, ito yung nakabase rin sa theoretical framework mo, nakaangkla si conceptual kay theoretical, pero ito, pinaliliwanag niya na yung specific sa study mo. The dependent, independent, intervening, and sometimes the antecedent variables are identified. Diba? Patungkol na yan sa study mo. Nakalagay na siya sa conceptual framework mo. And the possible links among them are explained. The explanation is based on the theoretical framework. Yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na nakaangkla siya. A schematic diagram of assumed flow of relationship among variables is presented. Theoretical and conceptual framework may be presented separately or together. Depende rin yan sa format ng institution ninyo. Dito, sa conceptual framework, dyan na rin lalabas yung paradigm of the study ninyo. Yung kadalasan sa inyo, IPO ang ginamit, input, output, and process. Then, hypothesis of the study, there are some institutions na hindi na nire-require ang hypothesis na ilagay pa ng separate. At yung iba nire-require. The hypotheses are statements or tentative answers on the research objective. Although the hypothesis is often stated in null form, the alternative hypothesis is generally preferred. The hypothesis of the study must be coherent with the research or the study objectives. Then, operational definition of variables and other terms. Ito yung definition of terms. Kaya nga sabi dyan, operational definition. Kasi the major variables of the study and other relevant terms should be operationally defined according to how they are used in the study. Yan yung sinasabi ko sa inyo mula nung nag-present kayo. Hindi ko pa pinasasama, sinama nyo eh. Ang nilalagay doon, Hindi na yung kunwari, PNP. Tapos ilalagay mo doon, Philippine National Police. It is the main law enforcement agency of the Philippines. Hindi mo na kailangan ipaliwanag yon kasi kumbaga, yan naman talaga ang definition ng PNP. Sila naman talaga ang main law enforcement agency of the Philippines. Hindi mo na siya kailangan ipaliwanag pa kasi alam na ng lahat yon. Ang sinasama mo lang dyan sa definition of terms ay kung papaano mo siya gagamitin dun sa study mo. For example, sinabi, students. Yun, nasa definition of term mo. Hindi mo nasasabihin doon na students are people who are enrolled in a certain school that are given lessons, chu-chu-chu-chu. Hindi na ganun. Alam naman ng lahat na yun ang ibig sabihin ng estudyante. Pwedeng define mo doon, these are people who are enrolled at exact colleges of Asia for the academic year 2021 to 2022. Yun yung definition mo ng students. Kaya pag sinabing students doon sa study mo, matik sila yung mga naka-enroll sa exact ngayong academic year 2021 to 2022. Kasi dinefine mo na sila kung paano mo siya gagamitin doon sa study na yun. Okay. The operational definition must indicate how a variable is going to be measured. Then, significance or importance of the study, yung mga, ito, hindi ko pa rin pinasasama, pero sinama ng iba sa inyo, tama naman yung ginawa ng iba, yung iba hindi. So, the proponent must explain the relevance and usefulness of the study, expected contributions of study groups or individuals, individual users of the results of the study should be mentioned. For example, teacher. This study will be beneficial to teachers because, ganito, this law enforcement agencies, this study will be beneficial to law enforcement agencies because it will help them in policy making, in ganito, ganyan. Yun, significance or importance of the study. Then, scope and limitations of the study. The scope and limits of the study in terms of subject matter, subjects, variables to be considered, and the study design are explained. The implications of these limitations to the results, conclusions, and to the use of the findings are explained. Sasabihin mo dyan kung hanggang saan lang ang study mo. Lahat ng study ay may hangganan. Hindi naman ibig sabihin ng limitation na may limit ang study mo ay weak ang study mo. Hindi. Kasi pag sinabi, kumbaga dyan mo ilalagay yung inclusion and exclusion criteria. Pag sinabi nating inclusion criteria, these are the criteria na dapat ma-meet ng isang respondent bago siya makapag-participate sa study. Kapag mayroon naman siyang katangian na pasok sa exclusion criteria, hindi siya pwedeng mag-participate sa study. For example, sabi mo sa inclusion criteria, at least 18 years old. Tapos may binigyan ka ng survey questionnaire. Sabi niya, 16 pa lang siya. So, hindi na siya pwede. Kasi nga, ang inclusion ay yung mga 18 pataas. Gets nyo? Ano naman ang exclusion criteria? For example, sinabi mo doon na hindi pwede mag-participate ang bulag. Kasi, ayaw mo lang. Kasi wala kang time at funds na ipa-convert pa ng braille yung questionnaire mo. So, exclusion criteria ay yung mga visually impaired. O sabihin natin, 18 years old nga siya. O, kunyari, 20 years old siya. So, pasok siya, di ba? Inclusion criteria. Ang inclusion mo lang naman, 18, pero siya 20. So, pasok. Kaso sa exclusion, nag-count. Sabi, bawal ang visually impaired. Bulag nga siya. So, excluded na siya. Yun. Ilalagay mo lang yung hanggan ng study mo. Tapos, another example, sabi mo, ang data na i-analyze mo lang ay from 2010 to 2020. Yun, i-declare mo dyan sa limit, scope, yun yung sakop, di ba? Scope and limitation. Okay. So, ito yun. Terms of subject matter, subjects, variables to be considered, and the study design are explained in your scope and limitation. Then part 2, chapter 2 ito sa iba. But in some institutions, this is part of chapter 1. Anyway, ito ang review of related literature. It may either be presented as an independent section of the proposal or incorporated in the presentation of the problem statement. Katulad nga ng sinasabi natin kanina pa. Some background information about the problem may be included in this section if there are important aspects about the problem which need to be explained. References for this part may be taken from the articles in scientific or professional journals, abstract, electronic libraries, online reference, monographs, and other sources. Related studies must be synthesized according to topic. Similar findings as well as conflicting findings are synthesized. Information gaps are pointed. So sa review of related literature, dyan mo na ilalagay lahat ng impormasyon. Kukunin mo ngayon sa mga journals, online references, electronic libraries, news articles, pwede rin naman. But the best documents to gather information for your review of related literature are journals. Hindi news articles, hindi blogs. Ha? Baka kung ano-anong nyari, nakakita kayo ng news article sa Rappler. Rappler, yes, Rappler is a good blog site, but it is not always correct. Hindi ko sinasabi dahil alam ko yon, but I know na nasampahan sila ng cyber libel. Kung ikaw ay nasampahan ng cyber libel, malamang there is question to the integrity of your news article. So, you cannot use yung mga ganun na sources. Baka yung pinagkuhanan ninyo, puro Rappler, hindi magiging maganda ang study ninyo. Dapat journals hanggat maaari. Maliban na lang kung magbibigay kayo ng example. For example, ang sabi nyo, katulad ko, ang study ko is about restorative justice. So, gusto kong i-connect na dapat magkaroon ng restorative justice para maprotektahan ang estudyante, pati na rin ang mga teachers. Para hindi na nagsasampahan ng kaso, nag-uusap na lang sila. Then, I also cited yung tungkol kay Tulfo. Familiar kayo sa case na yon, yung hindi dala nung estudyante yung report card niya, tapos pinalabas siya ng teacher, tapos yung lola nung estudyante na yon, pinatulfo yung teacher. So, sabi ni Tulfo, kailangan daw mag-resign na yung teacher, tapos i-revoke din daw yung lisensya niya sa pagiging teacher. O, di ba? That's unfair for teachers. Of course, we believe in due process. At meron naman due process. Kaso, kapag sinasubject mo sa mga ganong instances, syempre, national ang scope nun. Online yun eh. Baka nga worldwide pa. Tapos, syempre, walang privacy. Tinawagan ni Tulfo, tapos kinausap, yung mga ganon, di ba? So, yun yung mga instances na pwedeng magsama ng mga news articles kapag i-connect mo siya or ibibigay mo yun as examples doon sa mga doon sa study mo. Pwede yun. Okay. Okay. Then, ipapakita mo rin doon kung ano yung mga parte ng information gap. Ano yung mga information gap na meron pa. At yun yung mga sasabihin mo doon, susubukan mong punan. Then, this is methodology. Some, chapter 3 ito. Some, chapter 2. Then, this section of the proposal identifies and describes the research design, the sampling technique, the instruments that will be used and how they will be prepared, validated and administered, and the data processing and analysis to be done. So, yung paraan ng process mo, pag-analyze mo, at pag-interpret mo ng data, babanggitin mo sa methodology. Method nga siya, di ba? Yung paraan ng paggawa ng research mo. From the term itself, method. Then, research design. This is the proposed design. If the proposed design is experimental, the treatment or intervention and how the experiment will be undertaken are described. But for majority of your researches, they are descriptive, hindi naman sila experimental. Actually, wala namang mag-experimental sa inyo. Okay? And I advise you not to do that. Wag nang mag-experimental, mahirap. The target population and the sampling procedures. Ito, na-discuss na natin to before. Target population and the sampling technique that will be used in the study are identified. The processes of determining the sample size and how the study sample will be drawn are described in detail. Babanggitin mo lahat doon. Gagamit po ako ng ganitong software para makuha yung sample size. Describe mo lahat. Ganito po ang computation na gagamitin ko para makuha ang sample size. For experimental studies, the process of how the subjects will be randomly assigned to the experimental and control group are explained. Then, as part of your methodology is the data collection. The procedures for the collection of data are described in this section. Included are description of the data collection techniques that will be used, instruments that will be used and how they are going to be prepared, validated, and tested for reliability, pre-filled preparations, including permits to be secured, courtesy informed, training, and reproduction of instruments. Ilalagay mo na doon yung survey questionnaire na gagamitin mo na sabihin natin ginawa mo, tapos pina-check mo sa experts or in-adapt mo, pinagpaalam mo doon sa original na gumawa. Yung mga letters, isasama mo na rin. Then fieldwork and quality control. It is useful to prepare table of specifications of variables and data to be collected. This can serve as basis for the preparation of the research instruments. Then data processing and data analysis plan. This section describes the procedure for processing the data, what software will be used, if any, and what tools will be used in data analysis. Ilalagay mo na doon yung mga statistical formulas kung meron man na gagamitin mo para sa research. Yun nga, ipa-plan out mo siya, i-layout mo yung plan mo dyan in this part. Then, bibliography or references. This section contains an alphabetical listing of references cited in the study. So, lahat lang ng resources mo, lalagay mo dyan. Then, appendices. The material or documents which we used in the study but should not be presented in the body of proposal are placed in the appendix. So, ito yung mga research instrument materials. Ito yung questionnaire mo. Relevant communications, yung mga letters mo sa barangay, letters mo sa school, kumbaga mga pinagpaalaman mo. Dummy tables for analysis. Yung mga hindi naman na sinasama sa body pero nakuha mo siya na data, ilalagay mo rin doon. Tingnan natin kung meron. Wala. Sige. Tuloy na lang. Then, schedule of activities. Ilalagay mo rin sa appendices. Gantt chart, pwede kayong gumamit nun. And then, budget requirements kung meron man. Then, the research report. To be useful, the research results must be reported so they can read and use that. So that research reports, ano ba yan? By more people, they should be written and presented in a form that is understandable and usable. A research report should be written in the style that is appropriate to its intended audience or readers. Ano yung laman niya? Ito yung first part, preliminary sections. Kaya nga siya, first part, kasi preliminary. So, title page. So, andun yung title of the report, the author, the date. Tsaka yung, tawag dito, yung mga, this research is presented to the faculty of ganito, ganyan, for completion and the requirements of BS Criminology, mga ganon. Then, ilalagay mo rin yung approval sheet kasi ito ay yung research mo, i-approve ng panel. Kapag wala yan, ibig sabihin, hindi approve ang research mo. Okay, then, of course, table of contents, list of tables. Lahat ng table na ginawa mo, may title yon. Tapos ilalagay mo lahat yon. Pati figures. Figures are yung mga images. For example, yung paradigm of the study. Yun. Ilalagay mo siya doon sa list of figures. Magkahiwalay yan, list of tables and list of figures. And then acknowledgement, yung mga gusto mong pasalamatan. Mga tumulong sa'yo, yung mga nag-push sa'yo na gawin yung research and all. Then, nagigas niyo ba? Ito na yung buong research ha. Ito yung mga parte niya. Then, second part is the text or body of the report. Ito na yung mismong nilalaman, yung pinakamahalaga sa research. Introduction, statement of the problem or research objectives, theoretical and conceptual framework, hypothesis, significance of the study, scope and limitation, literature review, methodology, findings and discussion, and conclusions or recommendation. Ito na yun. Chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. Ito yun. Then the last part is the reference materials, your references or bibliography and the appendices. Letter C yan. Okay, ano ang laman? Sila. Title page. The title page contains the title of the study, the author, and the date of completion. The title must be brief and simple. Abstract. The abstract is a brief descriptive summary of research report. It includes the statement of the research problem or the objectives of the study, a brief description of the research methods used, a summary of the major findings, and statement of conclusions and recommendations. Some institutions require executive summary, which is slightly longer than an abstract. Kaya alam ko na yung ibang study, yung ibang presentation ninyo ay copy-paste lang kasi may abstract na. Napaka-imposible nun. Pinagagawa ko pa lang yung chapter 1, may abstract na kayo. Ano bang sabi dito? Brief, descriptive summary of the research report. Ano yung research report? Etong buo. Like yun, chapter 1 pa lang pinagagawa ko. May conclusion na kayo, may recommendation na rin kayo. Matindi. Sobrang tindi nyo. Pangtawa ko yung abstract kayo agad. Pag nangungopya kasi kayo, siguraduhin nyo naman na wala kayong lusot. Approval sheet. The approval sheet provides space for the signatures of the advisors, readers, and oral panelists, the dean, and others, indicating their appearance of research work. Most institutions have a model form for this. Then, table of contents. Alam nyo na to. List of tables of figures. Ay na nga, ilalagay mo lang yung titles ng mga tables. Kunyari, table 1.1. Sex of the participants of the study. 1.2. Civil status of the participants of the study. Yung mga yun, ilalagay mo lahat dyan. Figure 1.1, paradigm of the study. Acknowledgement is where the writer expresses appreciation and gratitude for assistance received in the conduct of the study. Acknowledgements must be expressed simply, sincerely, and truly. I would like to thank my advisor for helping me all throughout this research, mga ganyan. Then, text or body. The body of the report begins with the first page of chapter 1, numbering in Arabic numerals. Starts on this page with number 1. All pages in this section are numbered including section or chapter title pages. Page numbers are position 1 inch from the top. Mahalaga. Sinasabi lang dyan, kailangan may page number. Then the body of the report are divided into review of related literature, methodology, findings, discussions, conclusions, and recommendations. Ito yung pinaka nilalaman na. Kaya nga siya body. Nilalaman ng research mo. Ito yung mga main content of your study. Introduction. The introductory chapter provides the background of the research. It explains The need for the study states the research problem and objectives and hypothesis, if any, specifies the scope and limits of the study, and explains the significance of the problem. All these are found in a well-written proposal. With slight modification, this section in the proposal can be used in the final report. Papalitan mo na lang yung iba dyan. Then, by the way, kapag research proposal, lahat future tense. This study will identify. Will. Kasi nga, gagawin mo pa lang. Yung iba sa inyo, past tense na ang ginawa at isa ring paraan yon kung paano ko nalaman na copy-paste lang yung iba doon. Kasi nga, past tense na. Ibig sabihin, nagawa mo na. Okay? Then, review of related literature. And then, pag tapos na yung study, papalitan mo ulit lahat yon, gagawin mong past tense. Yun pala. Then, review of related literature, usually written in a separate chapter, of course, again, depending sa institution ninyo, should not only summarize the articles, books, and other references reviewed, rather call the reader's attention to common findings as well as conflicting results of previous studies. Methodology. This chapter should describe how the study was conducted. Emphasis should be given to design, sampling procedure, data collection techniques, instruments used, and analytical procedures. The methodology should be discussed in the past tense. Then, findings and discussions. The findings of the study constitute the data presentation and the researcher's analysis of the data. Ito na nga yung pagpapaliwanag mo. Ano yung nakuha mong resulta mula doon sa data, then yung paliwanag mo doon. The discussion, which may be written separately from or integrated with the findings, presents the researcher's interpretation of the data and statement on the implication of the study or findings to theory and findings of related studies. The discussion goes beyond the data. Conclusions and recommendations. So conclusions are general statements which provides answers to the research problem. Based on the findings and conclusions of the study, recommendations are stated. The implications of the study of the findings for revising existing body of knowledge or theories are also included in this section. Kaya, yung iba kasi sa inyo, in-include nila sa SOP na may in-include sila sa SOP na pwedeng recommendation. Kunyari, what should be done for ganito ganyan. Inalis ko yon kasi nga that should be answered in the recommendation part. Hindi na siya kailangan maging problem. Okay, recommendation na siya. Kasi base dun sa mga nakuha mong data, magkaka-idea ka ngayon ano yung mga dapat gawin, ano yung mga dapat palitan. Ano pa yung mga dapat idagdag sa mga researches ninyo or sa mga facts about your research. And then references. This section contains references and appendices. References or bibliography contains an alphabetical listing of references cited and used in the study. I will teach you the APA format for this. Then APA is American Psychological Association. Then the appendices contain materials and documents used in the study but could not be presented in the body. Katulad nga ng mga request letters. Okay.